Today's the fifth day of Advent. Today we arrive at Abraham, who after Noah is the next person to make a meaningful relationship with God. And his story is too big. We couldn't possibly do it all in a couple minutes, but we'll focus today on the way that God promises that Abraham's descendants will outnumber the stars, which Abraham thinks is pretty silly because he's like 100 years old and doesn't have any kids, but God's promise comes true. And as Abraham's family grows, his descendants grow, those people become God's chosen people. Which is pretty cool because God could pick, a king and be like, hey, go and conquer all of the world and then I'll be God of the whole world. And that's not how our God works. Instead, God picks a person and says, you're going to have a family. And through your family, the world will come to know me. And that's how it works. And another thing I think is important here is that the three largest faiths in the world, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all trace their heritage back to Abraham. All three share this story together. And so in that way, all three really have the same God. Now, we do articulate that God a little differently, right? Christians cling to a triune God, which is different from the way that Jews or Muslims think about God. But it's not so different as though we're worshiping God and they're worshiping Zeus and they're worshiping Jupiter. No, we're all going back to the same Abrahamic God that we share together. And I think it's pretty important because it shows that we actually have way, way, way more in common with the other faiths of the world than we have different. I was at a conference recently, I heard Brian McLaren talk, and he said that it's not our differences that actually divide us. It's the way we're so similar. We're so similar to each other that the little things we have different, we cling to and we emphasize and we use as ways of saying, of trying to explain how we're not the same. And by focusing on those differences, it divides us. We live in a divided world where we often cling to the things that make us different from each other, that divide us from one another. How might we imagine a world together where we can be united? Not because we're exactly the same as everybody, but because we notice and we name our giant similarities, the things that we share in common, the things that unite us, as opposed to the little details that divide us. God promises a day when all people shall be gathered together and all will be united and reconciled together. It's what we yearn for in this season of Advent. And I think one of the ways we can work as we yearn is to start doing that ourselves, to see how we're not so different from each other, and to look with love on our similarities and accept our differences, but not make them the identity markers. Instead, to name and know that we are more alike than we are different. Remember that you are loved, and God's peace be with you.